Good afternoon, friends. Happy Friday to you. My name is Chris, and today is April 28th, 2023. This is episode 6 of the MMA Eco Live podcast. So glad you could join me. Took a week off last week. I'll do that from time to time, but hopefully not too often. Sometimes on weeks where there isn't as much news or events going on, but so happy you could join me. If you have not, definitely subscribe to this channel. Trying to build this thing up to be more of the essential parts of the content that I'm creating. So really appreciate that, especially if you enjoy it. Give it a thumbs up. Today, there's a ton of Asian MMA news and events going on this weekend that I'm going to run through. A lot going on in China, a lot going on in Japan, some going on in Kazakhstan, even some going on in Philippines. So a lot of good stuff. And of course, the main event of this Saturday's UFC fight night will be Song Yadong versus Ricky Simone. So I will get into that as well. And then I will take your questions about Asian MMA or whatever you want to ask me. So let's get started. The first thing that I wanted to touch on is we've got a pretty big show going on in Japan this evening. That is RIZIN Landmark 5 in Yoyogi. So it's a great card. We got back-to-back RIZIN events this weekend and next weekend. Excuse me. And I think this is a pretty solid show, especially for the Landmark series. So in the main event, we've got Juntaro Yoshiku versus Mikuru Asakura. So that's a big fight. Asakura, arguably one of the most popular fighters in RIZIN right now, and he is taking on a former champion, and Juntaro Yoshiku. Another fight that I've got my eye on this RIZIN event that seems definitely to be flying under the radar. Really exciting fight is Claire Lopez versus Rena Kubota. So Claire Lopez fought in Combate. She fought against Yasmin Uruguay, but she's 7-4, but her losses are to pretty good fighters. So I think that she is going to be a good test for Rena, and that should be a great fight. We've also got Kana Asakura versus Mei Yamaguchi. Mei is fighting her retirement fight, and honestly, the perfect timing to be retiring, in my opinion. So that should be interesting as well. Personally, I will probably be catching the end of the event as it starts at midnight my time, and then going to be going on through the morning. But I'll be catching some more of the events as the morning goes on. So those are tough shows for me to make, but there is that if you're in the U.S., there's like a combo deal. If you buy both RIZIN 42 and the Landmark show tonight, then you get it for $30 instead of paying $30 for both. So kind of a 2-for-1 deal there as well. But yeah, interested to see that show, how it unfolds. Another show that we have is Octagon 44. So that's a Kazakh promotion. Let me see if I can. I'm going to try sharing my screen to. I'll do that in a moment. So this Octagon 44 show going down in Almaty, Kazakhstan, and airing live on their YouTube channel, I believe at 7 a.m. Eastern, 4 a.m. Pacific, if I'm not mistaken. In the main event of that show, we've got undefeated Magomed Magomedov of Bahrain. He is fighting Idil Boranbayev. So he's defending his welterweight title with Octagon. He's definitely a really big prospect out there, especially from the Middle East. He's 11-0. So Boranbayev, a lot more experience than Magomedov. We'll see what he can do. Got to think he's not going to be sticking around Octagon too long, as great of a promotion as it is. But the other fight on that card that I have some interest in is women's fight between Ilana Bondarenko versus Firuza Sharapova. So Sharapova is 2-0, and I am going to share my screen for that. So let me just her profile is if I can. All right. Sure, I'll be much faster at this in the future, but. Well, why don't I just share my whole screen with you since it's not letting me do that? All right, so we have it. Well, clearly I've got some learning to do with this. Anyways, so Firuza Sharapova, she went 15-2 as a boxer in Kazakhstan, and she is now fighting in MMA. Like I said, she's 2-0, fights at bantamweight, 28 years old, and she has fought for Octagon twice, and she got a first-round stoppage in both fights. So interesting to see how she develops. She's fighting another fighter that's making she's making her pro debut. So still not a big fight for her. Good to get just a couple fights under her belt, just to spend as much time in the cage as she can. But she's definitely a prospect to keep an eye on. I'll have a little bit to say about Kazakhstan further into the broadcast. But for now, those are the two fights from Octagon that I've got my eye on. And then another interesting event going down this weekend is this event in China going down in Shanghai called Dongzhenge Fight. So if you remember me saying last week, April 22nd, there was supposed to be an event called Dragon Fight or Longsan FC going down in Shanghai. Well, that event the day before was canceled. It was supposed to feature a couple pretty prominent fighters, Yadong, older Chinese, well-beloved Chinese veteran. Also, Ding Miao was supposed to return on that card. That event was canceled. But there's another event in Shanghai this weekend that I just learned about a couple days ago, featuring a couple of pretty good fighters. In the main event, you've got two awesome Kazakh fighters, Aydin Tuartabieka versus Yerdana Ihunnuar. Gosh, that's a tough one even for me. Aydin, I feel like is a pretty good prospect. He's still pretty young in his career, still developing. As far as I know, he's 5-2. I've actually been working with him this week as he's been showing me some more videos of fights that should be on his record. So right now, I do have him at 15-2 on Tapology with 2 amateur fights. But he's fought on like the one Hero Series, one Warrior Series, whatever it's called. He's fought on that show. And he last fought, I believe, in JCK, where he came back with a win. So he's a pretty good fighter. He has gone through the UFC's the Shanghai Combine system. So he's in that system. Definitely a guy to keep your eye on. He's fighting another pretty good Kazakh fighter in Yerdana. And also on that card, you've got Wuzatsabieka Jehifu, who's like a 40-fight veteran, pretty good, 30 years old. He is also fighting in the co-main event. And then since this is interesting, since that Dragon Combat event was canceled last weekend, Ding Miao was supposed to fight on that event, but that fight was canceled. She has been rebooked to fight at this Dongzhenge event tomorrow. And interestingly enough, she will be fighting the girl that fought Yan Hui last week. A girl, I believe her name is, I don't know what her actual name is, but Chinese name is Mai Ji. She got submitted by Yan Hui in the first round and was victim to one of the worst wardrobe malfunctions I have ever seen. Feel really bad for her. She was caught in an armbar and then her top slipped up, and yeah, really unfortunate. Definitely, you gotta have fight equipment that sticks to your body well and is not going to slip around. So she has been rebooked to fight Ding Miao this weekend. So I'm not sure how this event is being broadcast yet, but I've got my eyes peeled and I'll definitely figure that out. So the next, and one of the probably like bigger Chinese events to take place or taking place this weekend, that is JCK on the 29th and on the 30th. So that is if you remember this massive tournament that JCK has been going through, and it has been such a slog because it's been off and on again with COVID. Now, with all the COVID restrictions lifted, they're finally able to just hold their events in their own time. So we have 2 events this weekend, and these are the quarterfinals of the whole tournament. And then the semifinals will go down on May 27th, the finals on June 24th. So kind of the cream of the crop fighting this weekend, 2 events, lots of great fights, too many good fighters to go through all of it, but just a couple highlights. In the main event, the first day tomorrow, we've got In Shuai versus Shamuhar Ideal Bieka. That's a great fight. We've also got Ari Gala, the welterweight, coming back. He's always surefire action, and a crazy fight that I have no idea how it's going to go down. Wang Jijung versus Aping Shale. Probably going to see Wang Jijung, the finer technician on the feet, win a striking fight is my pick for that. But Aping Shale developing really quickly. Got Cui Liu Tai back in action. We've got Liu Tong taking on Li Jingtao. Liu Tong, always been one of my top prospects out of China. And then kicking off the event, we've got Hailai Arke, 5-0 E flyweight. He's going to be taking on Li Peng, who has a lot more fights in him. So Hailai Arke, that would be just so crazy if he could make it to the finals. But man, he's in the same bracket as like In Shuai, Shamuhar. So that's a tough bracket for him to make his way through. But my pick, I think that In Shuai is probably going to repeat his last season, go all the way, and win that million kwai once again. But a lot of other great flyweights in the tournament. Just since I'm on the topic of JCK, the next day on the 30th, we've got another slate of fights. We've got in the main event of that card, got Korban Jung Tuolose Baka versus Ding Meng. That's a great fight, a rematch. And then in the co-main event, got Dana White's Contender Series alum Shang Zhifa fighting Cai Xiongxiong. So a lot of great fights on that one. Zhu Kongjie is on there. Tung Liga is on there. Ai Jaka, Akin Bieka, Aziz Kedara, Buho Yoga. So a lot of really great Chinese fighters fighting this weekend, and then they'll all be matched up again for May 27th, which happens to be the day of Road to UFC. So going to be some double booking there of Chinese fighters in China as well, since Road to UFC is going down in Shanghai. So those are the fights in China. And let me actually just, before I grab to the UFC event, let me just hop over to Pancrase. So Pancrase has an event this Sunday, which for me it's actually, or I guess it's scheduled for Saturday, but for some people it may actually take place in the early hours of Sunday, depending on where you live. But that's Pancrase 333. Got 4 title fights with Pancrase. The ones that I am interested in are the 2 women's title fights. So especially this one, we've got Karen Date fighting Haruka Salt Hasagawa in a rematch. So Karen, she is a 19-year-old, what is she, strawweight, and one of the top prospects out of Japan. She was 6-0, and then she fought Salt, Haruka Hasagawa, and lost by split decision. It was this big upset of this hot young prospect losing against this older veteran. So they booked the immediate rematch. So I'm definitely interested to see what kind of improvements Karen can make. Definitely no issue at all losing when you're that young in your career. She's still only 19 years old. So definitely interested to see what she, once she has faced this kind of adversity, her first loss, how she's going to respond to that. Also, we've got Takayo Hashi against Nori Date. So that's a very interesting fight as well. Takayo Hashi, I remember her, I believe she fought for an Invicta title like 10 years ago. So gosh, how old is Takayo Hashi these days? Let me just pull her up and take a look at her record. So Hashi is 18-8-1. She is 45 freaking years old. So she also kind of a mere parallel match to the Salt versus Karen fight. She also beat Nori Date in their last fight, where Hashi won a unanimous decision. So they booked an immediate rematch of that as well. So that's going down at Pancrase 333. So that'll be interesting. I'll be interested to see the results of that. Otherwise, let's hop to the UFC event. We've got Song Yadong fighting in his second consecutive UFC main event. Of course, you know the story. This was not supposed to be a main event, was supposed to be a co-main event, but no worries for me. When I heard this fight was booked against Ricky Simón, I was kind of crossing my fingers that it would be a main event, just because both guys have a long future in that division. Love seeing the young guys that are, have this endless potential get the main event slots, but happy it was finally actually booked as a main event for 5 rounds. So a really tough fight for me because Ricky Simón is a local guy. And of course, he's fighting a Chinese guy that I've had my eye on for so long. So tough fight. Hopefully it goes down. Each guy gets to show a lot of their different skills, and expecting a really competitive fight. 2 just extremely athletic guys. I could see Ricky Simón taking it if he's able to really hit the grappling over and over, but I also just feel like Song Yadong is growing so quickly with his grappling. If he can defend the takedown of Ricky Simón, then I think that Song is probably going to get the better of the striking, although Ricky Simón, I'm not counting Ricky Simón out even on the feet. So I don't even know who to pick for this one. I could see this going down to a decision, maybe a 3 rounds to 2 for one guy, but it could be close. I don't know if I see a finish in this fight unless Song Yadong is able to just lay it on him and get some kind of knockout in round 2 or 3. But otherwise, I think this fight probably goes to a decision. So it's a great fight. Interested to see if you guys have any thoughts about it as well. I'll be doing live coverage for Tapology throughout the whole event, so I'll be definitely really plugged in to this fight, this whole event. So definitely looking forward to that. A couple tidbits that I wanted to throw your way. One fight that I am able to break for a one championship event next month will be a guy that I am very closely connected with. Xia Lin Yang is going to be fighting Ivan Parshikov at One Friday Fights or One Lupini on May 19th. So you heard it here first. Contracts are signed. Ivan Parshikov taking on 7-1 bantamweight Xia Lin Yang. So Xia is coming off one of the most ferocious knockouts of all of 2022 that you all may have missed, but go back on my YouTube channel. Look for Xia Lin Yang at WKG last December, and man, just like a wild berserker KO finish where he had the guy knocked out against the ropes, and the ref partially just a referee error, but Xia was in the moment, blasting away, had this guy knocked out. So crazy finish. This guy is an absolute animal, coming off a hand injury and ready to go. And he is so freaking excited. For me, he's one of the guys that I manage. And so for me, it's been a fun experience to, for the first time, kind of like go through all the pre-fight stuff of like filling out paperwork and doing medicals, all that kind of stuff. Getting to see that from an insider point of view, I've really enjoyed that. So looking forward to seeing Xia compete in Bangkok. Ivan Parshikov is definitely a tough guy. He's a good grappler. He has won a couple times in one championship already. So they offered him a really tough fight for Xia, a really tough fight for his first one championship fight. Xia has actually fought for one championship in their Hero Series. He fought and won one fight for them as well. So they've had their eye on Xia for a long time. So we're able to get him a fight with the actual promotion. So we're excited about that. So he'll be fighting May 19th. And then I wanted to comment briefly. I saw this last week that Azat Maksum, new Kazakh flyweight with the UFC, signed to fight Tyson Nam on July 15th at a UFC fight night. And I've been hearing for a while, that the UFC is going to try and return to Kazakhstan this year. And I heard originally that they were going to try and book these two new flyweights, Kazakh flyweights, Asu Almabayev and also Azat, on this UFC Kazakhstan card. And it was potentially going to take place in the middle of the summer. It looks like obviously that's not happening. When I saw that booking, I was surprised because they're starting to book other fights for that event that were definitely not like Kazakh-centric, Central Asian-centric fighters. So I have heard that that July 15th event that the UFC is going to apply for a license for Las Vegas. Yay, another Apex event. So probably those guys are not going to make their UFC debut in Kazakhstan, but definitely keep your eyes peeled for that. I hear that it still could happen a little bit later this year, but the UFC is trying to go back to Kazakhstan. And then I don't know anything. I'm not speaking from any kind of knowledge. I'm just, pontificating on my own here, but it would make sense that if you're going to go back to Kazakhstan, the time is right to have Shavkat Rakhmonov headline that event against a top welterweight contender. Problem is there's not a lot of contenders available. Of course, there is Kamaru Usman floating around out there, but otherwise there's not a lot. I mean, Khamzat Chimaev moving up to middleweight, Colby Covington most likely fighting for the title later this year. Who knows what's going on with that whole thing with Leon Edwards, but so I don't know who Shavkat would fight. There's not a lot of fighters available. He's either beaten the guys below him or the guys above him, not totally available. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was someone like Vicente Luque. Again, don't know anything. Haven't heard anything about that. But yeah, obviously, I don't know why you would try to go to Kazakhstan without having Shavkat in the main event for that. I mean, he's in the perfect spot because if he fights a top contender, a good chance this next fight would be for a title, which they could have in Kazakhstan, especially if they go, like when they went back, when they were going to go in 2020, they're going to go to Kazakhstan, June of 2020. They're going to go to the Almaty Arena in Almaty, Kazakhstan, which is like a 30,000 seat arena. So not out of the question for them to have a title fight in Kazakhstan, but I think more likely especially for their first event, they would have like a #1 contender fight. And so the time is right. I mean, Shavkat last fought, what was it? Like, I don't remember the last time Shavkat fought, but it's been a minute. It's been a minute since he fought. So definitely interested to see that. And then there could be another Asian MMA event either later this summer or in the fall that I've heard about. So I've been asking around. Folks I've been talking to don't know. So I will keep my eyes peeled for that. But don't be surprised if UFC goes back to Kazakhstan. I don't know, August, September, October. We'll see. So, all right. Before I get into the comments, I just wanted to like put this out there that first of all, this channel has grown so much faster, and this like podcast has grown so much faster than I ever could have expected. What I would have expected, like what I have now for maybe like episode 20 or 30, even beyond that. But y'all are just like blowing up the comments every week, and it's really exciting for me. But in some ways, I definitely, some of the comments that I see, some of the back and forth I see y'all having, I really want this to be a safe place for everybody. And I know some of y'all probably rolling your eyes with that, but like some of the comments on here on this channel have not always been very kind. They have not, some I would say have drifted into some racist comments or just like really mean or derogatory. And so far I've just kind of been skipping over those because I don't want to give those a platform. I don't want to put those on the screen. Eventually, I may need to start blocking some people if you keep doing it. My main desire is I just want this to be a place of safety. And I know I sound like an idiot saying that in front of MMA fans, and that's probably kind of a hopeless goal. But as much as we can, guys, let's make this a positive place for each other at least. Let's make this a positive space. If y'all want to DM each other personally, I can't stop that. I still don't love that, but like at least in the chat, like if you're like tearing down a fighter because of their race, or just like dragging politics into things, or just like accusing all these fighters of being on steroids, things like that, those are just like not, those aren't helpful for anyone, and they honestly are just sort of like mean. And I would really appreciate it if you all help me to make this a safe space for everybody. So thank you. I don't want to have to get moderators and block people, but I'm just saying that's a very real possibility. So just try and filter what you say a little bit. Think about what you're going to say before you post it. Most of y'all are awesome. You're great. I really love answering your questions. So, but yeah, here we go. So James saying, remember how everyone in the MMA media in 2022 complaining that Marina Rodriguez should rematch Esparza, but at the same time asking for freshness at 115? Pretty hypocritical. I don't know. I mean, when you're saying like everyone in the MMA media, are you actually just talking about a couple media members? And which media members are you talking about? So that's, I don't know. I don't know if I totally agree with that. But okay, going on to Rain. You said in a previous video that social media following dictates the bout order. But for this week UFC card, you look at the following for the fighters, and it's not good. Yeah, it's not like, I wouldn't say social media following dictates the bout order, but it has a strong, definitely has a very strong influence in the bout order. So I did a breakdown of this Saturday's, I believe, or no, it was the Kansas City card and then last week's. I haven't looked at this one's to see kind of how the social media following breaks down. You're right that there's not hardly any strong like social media fighters with a strong social media following this week. Overall, yeah, it's another card of prelims. It's another card of fighters coming off losses, or which there's definitely a place for that. I'm not saying the card won't be exciting, not worth your time, but it's definitely on the lower end of like fan interest for sure. Not to say I'm not interested in this main event, but social media following does not strictly dictate the bout orders. There's other factors in play as well. There's timing, there's getting people to be engaged in the beginning of each segment of the card. Sometimes target audience also has something to do with that. These Apex cards, they don't really have a target audience. I think a lot of times they're just fulfillments of the ESPN contract. They are fulfillment of fighter contracts. And they're also ways to try and stack some of their bigger events as well by having some of the fighters at the beginning of their UFC careers on these cards. So, yeah. What do they do instead if the following is low? Well, you have to realize, like, just because a UFC fighter's following is low doesn't mean it's always going to be low. Colby Covington used to be like an unknown prelim fighter. Just remember things like that. Like Shavkat Rakhmonov was, opening prelims, things like that. So just because a fighter doesn't have a big following doesn't mean that they always will. Especially events like these, there's more of an opportunity than ever than them to sort of absorb all of the spotlight. So if you have a really good performance at one of these Apex shows, then you can kind of steal the show. Whereas if you're on like a UFC 290, a little bit harder to steal the show, even though you may be in front of more fans. So, there's always opportunities for fighters to build their following with call-outs, with pre-fight stuff, with shoving their opponent at the weigh-ins, and then, however the fight unfolds. So I don't think that I think that the UFC is like they really push fighters to build their social media following. They don't always do a lot to literally give them the resources to do that, but they definitely, they give out, I don't know if they still do it, but they would give out awards, like monetary bonuses for fighters that had certain social media followings, or just like they really want that. But unfortunately, that's not something that they're actually paying them to do, which is kind of crazy. But Yeah, so I think this hope that they can build their following. Think of like Waldo Cortez Acosta, who is from the Dominican Republic. He's fighting on this card, and Dominican Republic has a pretty like avid sports base. A lot of baseball players from the Dominican Republic in the in the what is that? The base. Here's how much I know about sports. In professional baseball, a lot of athletes from the Dominican Republic. So, I've been watching his like when he started his social media, he actually followed me on social media. I looked at his profile, and he had like 300 followers as a UFC fighter. He had 300 followers, and he's up to like 7,000 now, and he's been fighting pretty quietly on the prelims. So, watch him. He could be a big star if he keeps going, if he gets some knockouts. He's still undefeated. So, just an example. I'm not saying that he's destined to be a big star, but there is that opportunity. Some people wanted Weili to fight off Contenders at 115 instead of getting another rifle title shot. Seems stupid since Weili would just, well, I mean, it's your opinion. Could Weili probably beat most, if not all, strawweight contenders? Yeah, we'll see about Rose Namajunas if they can do that. So, yeah. So, okay. So, do you think the hate that Weili got pre and post UFC 261 after Rose made those comments were fair? No, they absolutely weren't fair. Not in the slightest. What are your initial pre-fight opinions on Reaching Long versus Zahabi? Faraz's brother is a good game planner and mind for the sport, so that should be an advantage. That is true, but just because you have an amazing coach and an amazing mind behind you, you still have to fight. You still have to be an athlete. You still have to be able to pull the trigger at the right times. Ayman Zahabi, he has looked okay. If I believe, he's starting to get up there in age a little bit. Let me just pull up his profile. So he is 9-2, 35 years old. Although he is on a 2-fight win streak over Draco Rodriguez and Ricky Turcios. So yeah, those are solid wins, especially the Turcios win. I think this is a good fight. I think if Reaching Long pushes this to the clinch and leans on his wrestling, he could. I pick Reaching Long in this fight. I think that he's got a little bit more firepower. He's a little bit rangier, if I'm not mistaken. He is. Let's see. Zahabi 68-inch reach. Reaching Long. Okay, slight reach advantage for Reaching Long, an inch, 1.3 inch. So maybe just fights a little bit longer, but yeah, I probably lean towards a Reaching Long in this fight. I think that if he especially uses his wrestling, but it's an interesting matchup. I am curious. I don't know a whole lot about Zahabi's game just yet, but I lean towards a Reaching Long in that fight. So Kinders, do you ever look to get your fighters sponsors as a manager? I do, and I'm working on that. And there's yeah. Short answer, yeah, we do. Guan Yu, first time to catch the show live. Hey, welcome to the show. How crazy is it that Ding Miao's fight was canceled alongside an entire show, and then the fight got picked up at a different show? Yeah, and she's actually changing opponents, but it's crazy that she is fighting another girl that just fought last week. I guess the girl that fought Yang Qinghui last week is just hanging around Shanghai. So yeah, really interesting. That whole thing, I was messaging with Ding Miao the other day, and like that the promoter of that show, Mr. Long San, is definitely like a character. She was sending me like posters from the event where he like Let me see if I can even just show you guys. They're hilarious. He made like posters for his event where he was like posing with all the other fighters, and then he was like, let's see if you can see this. Maybe not. Okay, well, that's the camera's not going to focus on that, but the image is him facing off next to Mike Tyson from like the 90s. So kind of a character, and I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but just glad that there was an event literally the next week in Shanghai that they could rebook me out. So she hasn't fought. She hasn't been all that active recently. So good to see her just get another fight. Do you think that Weili will get the winner of Andrade versus Yan instead of Rose or Lemos? Do you think that what is taking so long so they can put whoever wins on a short notice title fight? I don't think so, just because it seemed like Weili has dropped back into camp, and I think that they are looking to book her sooner than that. I would definitely think that it is Amanda Lemos. I haven't heard that definitively from anyone yet, but I do think that that's probably who it's going to be. Sounds like Rose is going to be out for a while, so I think it's going to be Amanda Lemos. They could definitely make that fight. Yeah, like you said, like a short notice fight if the winner is healthy. But yeah, I don't think so. I think that like ideal timeline for the UFC is if they're shooting to go to China, say in like November, then ideal timeline for them would be like, Weili fights Lemos in July or August, and then she fights the winner of this Andrade versus Yan fight, maybe in China in November. So I feel like that's what they're trying to set up. Of course, all that could go awry if like Amanda Lemos beats Zhang Weili. I don't think that's likely, but anything could happen. So I think that is what the plan is if they can pull it off. So what do you think of one's large financial losses? My MMA idol Jack Slack said it's really funny. Do you agree? The only thing that I find funny about it is just like the way that one championship or like Chatri Sichodong like skates around a lot of those questions, or like selectively puts like statistics to make them look like they're on top of the world. That is really funny to me sometimes. I mean, the reality is that they have sort of had to like turn over a ton of their roster and sign a lot of like lower level fighters to these Friday fight shows, and which is honestly like really like doing what they were doing was unsustainable already, but like they realized like, hey, we have to find a way to cut our costs. So they've overturned a lot of their roster, starting kind of with a fresh batch of fighters coming through these Friday fights events. So it's good that they are saving money that way. Eventually those fighters, will end up costing more as they're with the promotion longer. But those Friday fights, the Friday fights series has like a totally different budget. It's a much smaller budget than the Amazon Prime shows, and those contracts are much smaller. The bonuses are $10,000 instead of $50,000. So they are much, and a lot of those fight contracts are just for one fight at a time, aside from like multi-fight contracts. So they are definitely in trouble. And the more I learn, the less. The more I learn, the more worried I am. I sometimes talk to people that have worked for one, or are like, or are just they know people deep within the organization. It is not a good outlook at all. A couple of things that I've heard, I'm just like, man, like, that is really worrisome. So sucks for the fighters. I mean, that one Kyrgyz girl was offered a contract. She fought off of like 1,300 to show, 1,300 to win for one championship, like a promotion that's trying to be one of the top guys. So kind of crazy to me that they were able to afford signing Takeru, and also like I mean, I guess if they can just raise more venture capital, I don't know how they're going to sign Francis Ngannou because, yeah, I mean, you all know he's not going to be cheap. He is not a cheap fighter at all, and he left the UFC partially overpaid, not totally overpaid, but I'm just wondering, like, are they going to be able to meet everything that Francis Ngannou wants? But honestly, like, Chatri was, I know I'm going on a little bit of a rabbit trail, but he was talking about, like, you know, one championship's heavyweight division is the toughest one out there for Francis Ngannou. And I mean, Anatoly Malkin, sure, like I think he's one of the best heavyweights in the world. Marcus Buchecha, I don't think that's as competitive of a fight as Chatri thinks. And I just don't know who else past that would be like a real challenge for Francis Ngannou. So I don't know. Very interesting. All eyes are on this Colorado show next week, right? Let's see. Dan Tom recently said on PYN that Burns and Oliveira are getting bad matchups thrown at them. They deserve better, and the media should be ashamed of these. Keep calling these fights bangers. Do you agree? So Burns fighting Bilal Muhammad, that is not a bad matchup for. I don't see how that's like a bad stylistic matchup for him at all. I disagree that those are like mismatches for sure. So those, and then Oliveira fighting Beneil Dariush. I mean, maybe I'm missing something with all those fights. Like they seem fairly equal to me. So, and they're with top contenders. Both of those fights with top 5 guys. So either way, I mean, part of it is just like the logjam in the divisions. Like with like Colby Covington's getting this fight, and so like these are the next 2 guys, Burns and Bilal Muhammad. So yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that. So what are your thoughts on record padding as a manager? Do you try to steer clear from that? I do, and you know, record padding, it's not always as clear cut as you may think. Sometimes fighters just have a hard time getting a fight and they want to stay really active. So like, I mean, it happens a lot in China, right? Like, for example, Cholun, he fought actually today over in Qinghai province in China. He fought like a 1-3 Mongolian fighter. And then at JCK, he fought like another like 1-2 Mongolian fighter. He's got like almost, I think he's like 19-8 or something. He's been on Road to UFC, Dana White's Contender Series, performed well, but not to his best on both of those shows. And he's fighting these guys with like 3-4 fights who have losing records. I think for a guy like Cholun, like he just wants to stay active, and you know he's probably not getting paid much for those fights, but that's just what he wants, and I don't agree with it. And you know, someone that is looking to sign him, they know like, okay, he hasn't been fighting anyone good, so before we really take him seriously, we need to see him fight someone good. So I definitely, it's a fine line between what is this win going to get us versus fighting someone above our pay grade that's just going to add an unnecessary loss to our record. Because as managers, and as much as we want to believe in our fighters and think that they could be a world champion someday, we also have to be realistic, and that like, yeah, we don't want to just add a lot of losses to the record. We recognize that they still can lose, and so there's definitely a strategy to that of finding the right kinds of fights. It definitely is appealing if someone's going to pay you $10,000, $15,000 to fight a fight that is really, really winnable for you. So, sometimes that's the case where you have this promoter that is willing to pay you a ton of money to fight a scrub. Are you really like doing something unethical by taking that fight and getting a huge payday for your fighter? So I don't think so. And then, if the fighter gets paid, then they can have a better life for themselves. They can maybe travel around a little bit to train, to have a little bit more leisure to focus more on their training. So looking at a big picture, there are advantages to taking fights that you're pretty much guaranteed to win. So yeah, and then record padding. Some people say like it happens a lot with a fighter early in their career, you know, but I always just say if you're like less than 10 fights, go ahead and just pad your record, get some highlights added to your highlight reel, get some easy cash, do all that, especially while you're young. Just get some easy wins under your belt. Doesn't matter what the records are, honestly. But, you know, if you want to be taken seriously, you have to get some high quality opponents. So great question. Okay, so how do you get excited for MMA when promoters are getting worse, cards are not getting better, and media is saturated with hot takes? Well, all we can do, someone like me, is just create my own platform and make the content that I want to make. Focus on the things that I want to focus on. There's no matter, and you're right about all of that. Some promoters are getting pretty like unhinged and a lot of hot takes out there, not always the best cards, but like, one thing about MMA is that there will always be storylines where you look for them. So for me, I can just choose the storylines that I want to focus on and get excited about those things. So there's a lot of things that I don't cover in my coverage because you're right, they just don't excite me. But because there's so much MMA out there, you're right, it is very saturated. Different media outlets, unless you're like in, you know, one of the top guys where you kind of have a journalistic obligation to cover at least the top promotions. You know, for someone like me, I can pick and choose what I want to cover a little bit more. So that's how I see it, is just like find the storylines, find the niches of MMA that I want to cover that excite me and sticking to that. So yeah, we'll see. Thing is, people say like hot takes, you know, cards not getting better, promoters, all this stuff, but like people are buying it. What someone said once, like, if we want people to stop making bad movies, then stop going to them. You know, they make bad movies because we keep paying for them. So if you are sick of hot takes, don't read those articles and don't watch the shows that you think are boring or you're not interested in. So I know a lot of you already do that, but they're following the money. Hate to say it, but word on the interweb, Weibo, is that Weili won't be doing media with anyone she doesn't trust. The only U.S. media she will do are Fight Week obligations. She will be doing media for Migu. Thoughts? Now that's her opinion. I think, you know, as a fighter, you totally have the right to discriminate and choose which media you want to do an interview with, especially if you're getting a lot of requests. I get that. I mean, I think it's fine to do interviews with people that you trust. I mean, for Wei Li, she's kind of she say this like this isn't derogatory, but like a gym rat, you know, she just kind of hangs out in the gym all the time. So for her, she is not looking to spend a lot of time on Zoom calls and with a microphone in front of her face. She just wants to train. So it sounds like she'll do interviews with people that she has a connection with, and because that excites her and she kind of knows what she's getting. But you know, that's just her preference. If I was a fighter, I would probably do things a little bit differently. But you know, that's what works for her life, her schedule, and her preferences. So let's see. Asking about Joanna's retirement, bigger than Weili spinning back fist over Joanna. It seemed like the whole week media was just interviewing. Yeah, I mean, like Joanna, she's a really big star, and she has a lot of following. So it wasn't surprising to me, you know. If a fighter at that time like has a lot more star power, it doesn't surprise me if they get a little bit more of a share of media, and especially if you're retiring as well. It doesn't surprise me. Not to say that I think it's right, but it doesn't surprise me. Do you think Yan Xiaonan is a good challenge for Weili? I do not, and neither do most Chinese MMA fans. Yeah, I would definitely pick Weili in that fight. either by something on the ground or by a late TKO, maybe, or I don't know. Yeah, I think Weili would probably take that fight. Seems like she is just a little bit better in most areas, but man, the toughness of Yan Xiaonan in that Mackenzie Dern fight. Mackenzie Dern couldn't submit her. I don't know if Zhang Weili is going to have her way with her on the ground. We saw Carla Esparza take down Yan Xiaonan and get that TKO finish. But so there's always something like that possible. But yeah, definitely favor Zhang Weili in that fight. I went to Bilibili to look up what people were saying about Yan, and they were very dismissive of her. Yeah, be careful of that, but makes sense. Kind of talked about this last week. What do you think of MMA media members who have never fought before but give technical advice in their content, like MMA Guru telling Sean O'Malley in an interview that his right hand drops when he kicks, and Peter Yan will exploit that? Yeah, I mean, you do got to be careful about, like, you have to. I think if you're telling a fighter what to do, that's one thing, but I think it's totally appropriate for MMA media members to make breakdowns. Totally. I mean, fighters are not always. The thing is like fighters know their own game. They know how to fight, but they're not always the best at communicating the ins and outs of the game. And I think about Luke Thomas. I was watching his show yesterday, and Israel Adesanya, like, on a recent interview, he like pointed out Luke Thomas and said, like, yeah, his breakdowns of my game are amazing, second to none, all this stuff. And same thing with like Teddy Atlas had a breakdown of Israel Adesanya as well. So like, I mean, if it's good, then that's fine. I think you just have to be careful to tell a fighter what they should or shouldn't be doing, to be respectful of that. But I think most of the time that's not an issue. Again, like, people all across sports do breakdowns and analysis that haven't competed professionally in that sport. So there's definitely, I think about like John Anik. So John Anik has never competed MMA. And so for him, he puts a ton of pressure on himself, even more than any other commentator, to learn MMA, the ins and outs of it, and the technique of it, because he doesn't have that background. He's sitting next to Cormier and even Joe Rogan, who has a really solid jiu-jitsu background. But I think most MMA media members have at least trained at some point in their career. They've at least trained, so they know what it's like. They know how some of these things feel, and they've spent a lot of time in gyms as well. So, yeah, I think if it's good, then why not? Okay, so let's see. Why is it a great temptation for MMA media to simply declare a fighter was too good or hungrier to explain a performance? I don't know. I think a lot of like really experienced MMA media members would probably not rely on those kind of cliches. I mean, it's not that there's nothing behind saying, like, in this moment, in the third round, when both fighters were worn out, fighter B was just able to like find something deep within themselves and just push harder. I think there is something behind that, but I don't know. Yeah, I guess like I would be really careful about just saying like they just wanted it more, they were hungrier, because every fighter is hungry, especially like at the top level, like in the UFC, One Championship, Bellator, PFL. Like, all these fighters are hungry, they all want it, but like, I mean, we've seen fighters quit. We've seen fighters say like no more, or like essentially give up. We've seen that before, and there is something to that. But I don't know. I would definitely disagree. I would never want to just like rely on like this fighter was hungrier. That's kind of a sports cliche that I think dismisses a lot of what is going on, with the technique, or with cardio, things like that. Sometimes like cardio if someone has really bad cardio, strength and conditioning, it can look like they don't want it. But like, I mean, if you're an athlete, even if you've been running, like it's hard to maintain, you can't maintain the same pace of running for the entire race. If you're running a long distance race, you're going to get tired. You're going to slow down a little bit. Doesn't mean you don't want it. It just means you literally physically cannot keep going at that pace. So I think those could get confused a little bit as well. He said, last time I checked, fighting is about exploiting reliable habits from your opponent and creating openings. Definitely. Let's see. So is it good for MMA media members, such as yourself, to create polls on who people will think they win? This is something I do. Why do reporters think that the Tapology polls are so important when making fight picks? Yeah, it's a good question. Because I think if we're all honest, not all of us can make educated decisions on picking every single fight. And it's also interesting to look at those things just to see what perception is. So when if I'm going on Tapology to make picks, yeah, I'll see who has more like, I guess, sorry, my computer is telling me that it is quickly dying. So let me adjust real quick. Won't take long. Let me just plug it in. I tried to charge this thing up. My apartment where I'm sitting right now is like the farthest point away from all outlets, but this is like the best place to do it. So give me like 10 seconds and I will plug in real quick. All right, that was embarrassing. Yeah, well, I learned my lesson from that, didn't I? Learned my lesson from that. That was pretty annoying. But yeah, I think I like seeing those kind of polls, not necessarily. Sometimes, honestly, I'm just like, I don't know much about this fight. And so if I'm going to make a pick, I may just pick what the majority of people are saying. And so I'll be honest, I do that sometimes because I literally can't keep up with every single fighter and how good they are, their skills, and break down every fight. But I think it is interesting just to see like perception. Those are always really interesting to me to see what people are, just how people perceive a fight could go down. Let's see. I'm on Santino DeFranco and Brandon Olivi's Discord, and they said that cardio is the most important thing they look for in analyzing a fight. You think this is the correct approach? That's an interesting point. I like how that sounds. Obviously, you couldn't just get like a long distance runner and put them in the cage. When thinking about a fighter's potential, or when analyzing a fight. Because a lot of times when you have skills that, clash in a certain way, it could be who's able to effectively implement that game plan from start to finish, not just at the beginning of the fight. So that's hard to say. I can see an argument for that, especially if you're looking at two fighters who are fairly equal. I could see that. And I'm just thinking about like the Ricky Simone fight this weekend. I don't think that Song Yadong necessarily has bad cardio, but like Ricky Simone is like, yeah, he's a warhorse. He's a machine. So that could be something to look for. Is Ricky Simone going to take over in the later rounds? That's an interesting thought. I'll definitely be thinking about that. Chris, what do you think about? I don't know what that means. Shiming being chosen to be on a stamp for China Post. I didn't know about that. Yeah, interesting. WMMA scene asking if I'll be in Denver next weekend. Or yeah, next weekend. I will not be. Wish I could. Could take a direct flight there, I guess. But yeah, I will not be at that event. But yeah, I thought I heard that you might be there. So definitely, yeah, I'll be watching for your coverage. A lot of good women's fights. Got Invicta on Wednesday. Definitely like Jolene DeCourcy defending her title. And then some good fights. We got Stamp Fairtex versus Elise Anderson at the one show. So yeah, a lot of good fights there. Let's see. Surprisingly said, wrestling is not that important when you get taken down, the ability to get back up. Stephen, hello. UFC Kazakhstan would be sick. Yeah, really, really hoping for us to get that. Jimmy says, where do you get your reliable sources when you say, I've heard that? That's a great question. How does someone that was just an MMA fan get reliable sources? You kind of, part of it is that everyone that you talk to has a trust factor, and you hear things all the time. But certain people, if I have like a trust score, sometimes I'm like, your trust score is not very good. So people will tell me things, and then what I can do is think through like, who else do I know? Who else could I get to know that may be able to verify that? So I think like if I'm having multiple sources to confirm the same information, that's essential, especially if you're dealing with some kind of shaky information. I heard they said this or that, but yeah, so multiple sources definitely a thing. When I started this a little over 2 years ago, I was just an MMA fan. I didn't have sources. I didn't know people. And then just getting into like covering Chinese MMA just on my own platform, which anybody technically could do, eventually I started making connections, starting to, just DM people. And then sometimes those people tell you, kind of helps you to connect you to someone else who connects you to someone else. And then of course there's like the people in the sport that like the really like central managers, that are connected to the biggest fighters. Those people are like really hard to get access to because a lot of people want information. They're very busy people. But eventually, if you're in it for long enough, you'll start to build up trust with them. So all of being in the MMA media, if you're doing it the right way, is it's all trust. That's the currency. And sometimes like you have to do things that people don't like, and that may hurt your trust. Or, sometimes like fighters or managers will get mad at you just because you picked against their fighters. Nothing you can do against that. That's not even just a trust thing. It's just like, okay, they just don't like me. They're not going to talk to me. But, for me, I know there's certain people, especially other media members, that I just know have like almost a flawless trust score. People like Ariel Helwani, Marcel Dorff, Nolan King, Cece Legaspi, these kind of people where it's like, I really don't like, I don't have to like I don't have to necessarily second guess them because I can trust because they pretty much bat 1,000 with their sources. So, but yeah, it's all about like, because I have like there's a couple other like fans that I know that are like really, really deeply plugged into certain markets or, Korea or Kazakhstan or whatever. And they'll be like, hey man, I heard this. And I'll be like, cool, thanks for that. And then I'm not going to go out there and publicize what I just heard from them, but I may just like ask around a little bit, like, hey, have you heard about this? And then, that person might be like, no, that's not true. or yeah, it was, but, or yeah, it is. And so it's just asking around, it's building trust. Honestly, just being like a decent person, being fair as you can be, builds your trust with other people. So yeah, and then like if you do interviews, that builds a connection that wasn't there before. So that's another way to like build trust, build connections, things like that. So it takes a long time. I think like, you know, for someone like me, I would love to be able to just like break every single one of like Zhang Weili, Song Yadong, all their fights. I'd love to be able to just break all the biggest fights, or, you know, Shavkat Rakhmonov, all those fighters. And, you know, I just have to tell myself, I've been in this game for 2 years, and it takes a long, long old time to build relationships. And so you just have to be patient, just keep acting in fairness, not like kissing up to people, but just like be a decent human being, act in fairness, and just keep initiating, keep asking people. So that's how I establish my reliable sources. Is they're honestly just like friendships, a lot of them. So that's how it works. Let's see. When is another UFC Australia? Good question. Dana White did say that the winner of this Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis fight in July would most likely fight Israel Adesanya in Australia potentially later this year. Now, if I'm doing the math, they're going to have that as a pay-per-view event, right? No way that's going to be a fight night card. So if I'm just doing the math here, if we've got pay-per-view a month, it's not going to be in August because that's the month after those two du Plessis and Whittaker fights. So it's not going to be August. Might not be in September. That would still be a quick turnaround. And originally, that was the target for the Conor McGregor-Michael Chandler fight, which you got to think is going to headline a pay-per-view. Who knows when that fight will go down with the whole USADA thing. That's kind of a wild card. But originally, that was the target for that fight. And so, yes, that's probably not going to be September. October is Abu Dhabi. And then November that's New York City. So we're looking at either December, if they're going to try and make it this year. Pay-per-view could be in December, or it could be in January. Timeline would think probably December or January, 1 to 2 months. So that is when I would think they will go back. Dana White said that would be in Sydney, Australia. So kind of crazy that they could go back to Australia with Adesanya Whittaker again. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with this contender fight, UFC 290. Let's see. You get a reliable source from fighters and their team. Exactly. Shavkat fought the first week of March. Thank you. Second round of Road to UFC will be held in Singapore in August or September. That lines up with what that makes a lot of sense to me. I have heard Singapore is on the table for this year again. So probably, yeah, they would do the next round of Road to UFC with that Singapore event. If they're going to do a pay-per-view, yeah, August or September. And man, I know it was like last year they went to Singapore with Yuri Prochazka and Zhang Weili. And I'm like, man, they could literally do that exact same thing again. If we have like Prochazka versus Jamal Hill, and then also Zhang Weili versus Amanda Ramos. Like, I mean, kind of crazy to think they could literally have the exact same two fighters in the like main and co-main. But or I guess it was maybe it was Robert Whittaker was the co-main last year. But yeah, that's my guess for Singapore is what you said, August or September. So let's see, thoughts on people who try to make some fighters. Try to bring some fighters down in order to make their fighter look better. I mean, it's hard. It's hard not to do, right? This is MMA. This is the fight business. Everyone is not like respectful, rationally minded, and like fair always. And the passion runs deep for people's fighters. So I know I don't do that, but it makes sense to me why people do Let's see, with Crew Chaudhry's acquisition of Takeru Sagawa, how soon will one's conquest of Japan and inevitable destruction of RIZIN be? Oh, that is an interesting prediction. I don't think that RIZIN is going to decline anytime soon. It seems to me like RIZIN is still growing as a promotion. It seems like they're pulling in some really good fighters, especially fighters from other countries too. And I'm really interested. I mean, it's a well-known secret among managers that like RIZIN is one of the highest paying promoters out there. And you gotta think, if they're paying fighters well, they're probably making some good money. I mean, yeah, all their events are on pay-per-view. They draw pretty big crowds. So, and they put on big fights. They put on really big fights. So, yeah, I don't see RIZIN going away anytime soon, is all I have to say. It seems like at least I don't know about RIZIN's financial situation, but like, it seems like I would think they're probably in a good financial situation. But the Takeru acquisition by one, really, really interesting, for sure. So I was honestly not expecting that to happen, but we'll see. It's a really interesting time for both promotions. I feel like they are in a sense kind of battling for like the Asian market, and one championship has to stay on top of their game. I mean, the thing is they're like diversifying a lot, trying to be a lot more globalized, and are they going to lose kind of their hold on a lot of the Asian market as they try to do that? Very interesting. I've made videos about that in the past, them signing a lot more European and Brazilian fighters, not as many Asian fighters on the roster. So that is what I would have to see from one championship, is them like really aggressively pursuing a lot of the top Asian talent and making Asian MMA a priority for them. So not saying it isn't any kind of priority, but it's just things are shifting around a lot. So we'll see. And is MMA, is that going to kind of take a back seat to some of their other martial arts? That's another really big question for one going forward, for sure. Let's see, how well known is Kai Tong in China, and is it a potential game changer for one now that they somehow have a male champion from that region? I mean, he won the belt last August. Let me just see what, I think he does have a pretty big following. I'm judging this on Weibo. So let's just see. He has 256,000 followers on Weibo, which is Chinese version of Twitter. So that's pretty good. That he's one of the top Chinese MMA fighters in China for sure. So I think he does have a pretty good following outside of China. Like his Instagram. Let me just look at what his Instagram is. I know these are not like total representations of a fighter's following, looking at their social media or like, you know, the popularity, but it is somewhat of a gauge. So on Instagram, he has 5.4 thousand followers. On Weibo, he has 256,000 followers. So yeah, I think he's pretty popular. So it's big for them. It's very big for sure. So yeah, to be clear, someone asking about Road to UFC in Singapore, I have not heard anything about that second round. I have not heard anything. I was asking people about Singapore the last couple of days. It's all kind of up in the air. So don't definitely, yeah. I wouldn't bank on that, but definitely have to think like at the time, end of May, September, and then like, I don't know, December, maybe after that. So, and they want to have those in Asian cities if possible. So that would put, you know, there has to be some kind of Asian event in early fall. So that would make sense. Of course, they could always do Abu Dhabi. Could do that. That's what they did last year. So yeah, the girl that fought for 13 and 13 was on a Lupini show. They can't go all out on pay for those shows, as it just would destroy the market in Thailand. Yeah, but like, if you're paying fighters 13 and 13, like that is abysmally bad pay. Like that is objectively bad pay. I, having like worked with fighters who are like 30 fights deep into their career, for them to get offered, a lot of times those kind of fighters will get offered 2K and 2K, and that is like pretty bad pay too. And for her, like, yeah, you expect that if one championship is trying to be like a top player, like you can't be offering fighters 13 and 13. I know that's a Lupini show, but like, y'all, like, you got to do better. Like, sure, it would destroy the market in Thailand, but does that just, I don't know, like, you should have thought of that before, like, or if you're fine with that, just be okay with like, you're not going to get the top talent. And the way I'm kind of starting to see this is like, they want to sign fighters to their one Lupini shows, give them a couple fights, be able to try things out, and then if they're like doing really well, then they can move on to the prime shows, because those are a lot more top contenders, title fights, things like that. So in theory, it's a good kind of ecosystem to get them up into the bigger shows. But the problem is that if you're paying super, super low, if you're not paying much, like, you're not going to be able to really like attract and get a hold of the best talent. UAE Warriors pays more than that for like pretty like starter fighters. So that's what I worry about. It's like, yeah, I get all that, but like, how are you going to attract the best MMA fighters in the world if that's what you're paying them? That's just true. Like, I get all the arguments, but it's going to be hard. As for Takeru, he has an exclusive broadcast deal with Obama in Japan. Also, there's one there. I believe he is being paid for. Yeah, I guess that's true. It makes sense. Synchro saying, that's good, Chris, that you can still get excited by making great content. There are very few like you that make good. Well, thank you. Appreciate that, man. Any idea if Underground Battle MMA in the Philippines tomorrow will be streamed? Yeah, I didn't bring that up. But yeah, there is an Underground Battle MMA show in the Philippines tomorrow. It's like Philippines versus Korea fighters. And I looked really hard for that today to see if I could find any kind of streaming. Looked at their YouTube channel. They haven't posted any videos on their YouTube channel in a while. As far as I know, the show is still happening, but they haven't been posting a lot on any of their social media. So I'll be looking for that. I'll tweet something out for that, but I don't know. I did look for that today and I didn't see anything for that. So always just like so confounding to me when a promotion is having a show. I mean, if you're like, you know, in a high school gym, it's like, I'm not expecting you to have this like super developed social media strategy, but it seems like this is a pretty like big show, at least in terms of like kind of a cool theme. And there's not a lot of promotions in the Philippines. So yeah, I'm just kind of surprised that they haven't been posting much. And that makes me, first it made me think like, are they still having the show? But we'll see. I'll keep looking for that. There are definitely some names on Twitter that, you know, if they post a fight announcement, it's a sure thing, especially Marcel, who labels fights rumored, verbal agreement, official. Yeah, and that's another thing. I think when you see media outlets posting things that are rumors, as you kind of see the telephone progression of like, it goes from like an idea to like targeted, rumored, and then like this fight is happening. So when an outlet is posting a fight as official that is still targeted or rumored, then, you know, that's definitely a red flag. That hurts my trust score with them as well. So yeah, totally. It's no problem to say that you hear a fight is targeted. You just have to properly label the fight at the stage that it's in, which is not official until both contracts are signed. Yeah, any chance of Singapore? I mentioned that. Looks like, seems like MMA is already taking a backseat in one. This week's Lupini card only had one fight. June's Amazon event has 4 MMA fights out of 10 total. Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed by that June event. It seemed like the events before and after the Colorado show are a little bit weak. Last week's One Fight Night 9 was a pretty weak event, at least in terms of their top names. And then the 11 card also a little bit disappointing. They've had a couple Friday fights, Lupini shows, which I don't even know what I see different. Like on the one website, I see it labeled as Friday fights. On the like Lupini website, they're labeled as one Lupini. So I don't even know what are we calling these shows, guys? But they've had a couple shows where there were some pretty good MMA fights that were pretty interesting. But yeah, yesterday they only had one. I think they just kind of come and go. But I would not be surprised if MMA because that's what I'm like really interested in with one is like, how are they going to stay relevant in the MMA discussion going forward? All that they're doing so much with kickboxing and Muay Thai and starting up grappling, all these things. And just like, do you have the budget to still pay and attract the top fighters? Do you have like the broadcast space to still like showcase the best fights? I mean, all these MMA fights on the Lupini shows are always like at the bottom of the show. And man, I'm just like, is this a priority? Like, don't get me wrong, y'all do definitely have a ton of really amazing fighters. A couple fighters that I would say are some of the best in the world. I'm definitely not saying that they don't have good fighters, but are you able to like sustain? I think just being able to sustain healthy divisions with top fighters who are well paid, that is what so far I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do. So I mean, especially it's like if Demetrius Johnson retires next week, that's like one of your biggest MMA stars. When was the last time they signed like a really big MMA fighter? It was Roberto Soldic was the last time they signed a really big MMA fighter. And of course, Francis Ngannou would totally change that, but I am not totally. There's so many options out there for Francis, and I just don't know if one is going to give him the best possible offer. So, yeah, we'll see. Even like, some folks are not going to like me saying this, but the show in Colorado next week, they declared it a sellout, but I heard that at first the ticket sales were not doing that well, and then they basically did comp tickets for the rest of the seats. In other words, they give away the tickets for free, and then declared a sellout. So, and that was a smaller venue. Yeah, I'm interested to see how things go. Of course, things look really good if you can declare things a sellout. You can declare things a sellout, then you're talking to the investors. You're talking to people wanting to book you for other events. So interesting stuff. Looks like today's last comment. Well, you appreciate all your comments, my man. That was the Kyrgyz girl's third or fourth fight. She's lucky to be making that much elsewhere with that much experience. Sure, but like, I feel like if you're fighting for one championship, you deserve a little bit more. That's just my opinion. I recognize you're not going to be making much money in your third or fourth pro fight, but it's just like, the thing is that one is not a local promotion. For that Kyrgyz girl, she's having to, like, she does a training camp, and then she has to fly from, which, one covers all that, but like, all things considered, after everything you have to pay, it is not always like, you don't even sometimes break even if you're making that little. After you pay like managers, coaches, all that stuff, like it just doesn't. You're basically if you're taking a fight for that little money, you're basically saying like, yeah, this is going to be like a dent for me financially. I'm not going to make anything off this fight, but I'm only fighting for like the potential to fight there again and potentially, you know, just keep going and eventually like a fight that's profitable. So, yeah, I would just love to see. I know it's easy for me to say. I don't manage their books, but like it was just kind of a bummer for sure. All right, guys. Appreciate you all so much. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for being so nice in the comments. No like incendiary comments today. Y'all are awesome. Keep it up. That's the kind of energy I love to see. So great questions this week. Enjoy all the fights in Japan, in China, Philippines, in the UFC this weekend, all over the world. Hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe.